sustainable. That refers to extended period of time. Number 2, competitive. You do it better than anyone else. And number 3, that it is something that you do with an advantage. There's something about what you do that is better than what anyone else can. So that's why in business, when you are developing an idea, you have to think very hard and be very honest with yourself, right? Because you know better than anyone else what your strengths are and your weaknesses are. Is it sustainable, competitive advantage? And the analogy I use in class is of a pain. What pain are you solving? Right? If there's no pain, there's no gain, they say. Well, the same applies in business. What pain are you solving for people? And not only what pain are you solving, what aspirin do you provide? Is your aspirin better than the competitor's aspirin? Because what if you're offering just the same type of aspirin as everybody else? We have a doctor in the audience, so she knows that aspirin is aspirin, so it might not be the best analogy. But the point is, if you don't offer something that is better, why would they buy from you? Why would they buy from you? What do you think? Why would they buy from you? Because they trust you better. They trust you more, maybe, right? Is maybe the same. But that in itself already is a better aspirin. If I have to choose between your aspirin and the one that Wanda is offering me, and I know you and I don't know Wanda, I'm going to prefer you. So that in itself is giving you a competitive advantage. Okay? So think about your pain and think about your aspirin. And when you do a crowdfunding campaign, make sure that you are offering an aspirin that is pretty attractive, and that you get a lot of people interested in helping you fund that business idea. Of course, you need money, right? How much money do you need to launch your business? Thought about it truly, honestly, how much money do you need? Really need? And you see a pattern here. How I describe really good idea, really need? Because I would suggest that many entrepreneurs, and there are differences of opinion here, but many entrepreneurs start their project or their idea with not a very accurate perspective in terms of what they truly need to fund it. Sometimes they underestimate, sometimes they overestimate. But you need to make that exercise, because nobody, if you're going through the traditional means, nobody's going to lend you money or give you money if you don't have a solid, tight case, right? So I teach entrepreneurship at CUNY, at Ostos, and part of my entrepreneurship class includes an end of the semester business competition. So I make my students develop a business idea, a business plan, and present that business plan. And I make it competitive. And the competition is the following. Whichever individual or group has the best idea for the investor, and I put myself the hat of the potential investor in that hypothetical investment competition. Whoever has the best idea gets an automatic A in the project, of course, but also is exempt from the final exam and gets an A on the final. And you can bet it gets pretty competitive, right? Healthy competition. So far, I've been teaching almost 3 years now, and there has been no backstabbing, there has been no violence in the classroom, but it is intense competition. Okay, and I do it for a reason, so that they really think through what they're going to present. Because if you just go through the motions and you just look at a format of a business plan and you look at those balance sheets and those tables of income and expenses and you just put whatever number comes to your mind, yeah, you'll have a business plan. But it's not going to serve you much. It certainly is not going to be acceptable to a serious investor who knows about the industry that you want to invest in. So thinking through the idea and determining how much money you really need is, in my opinion, critical. Now, who is going to give you the money? Of those who have a business, who attempted to get a loan from a bank? Much luck? Huh? Luck? No luck?
Yeah, one gave you 10,000.
One gave you 10,000. Was that pre or post financial crisis?
Probably before the financial
Before the financial crisis. Okay, and that's an important distinction. It's almost like 80 before Christ and after Christ in the sense of what we are experiencing in terms of access to capital, right? Because as you know, before the financial crisis, banks were lending very, very liberally, right? You have a pulse? Okay, I think you can buy that house. I'll give you a mortgage at 0.5% for the first 3 months, and then it'll jump to 9%, right? So your mortgage payment starts at $500, and then all of a sudden jumps to $1,500. So, and that's, I'm not going to go through the entire history of what caused the financial crisis, but the fact of the matter was that banks were lending very liberally, right? And when the real estate bubble burst, and a lot of banks started to show losses and foreclosures, etc., then the reaction was on the other direction. Now they're extremely conservative in their lending practices. And maybe there's some lenders or some bankers in the audience here, right? But you know what I'm talking about. Now, to get a loan from a commercial bank, you need to provide more than what you consider is adequate or public collateral. At the peak of the financial crisis, at the time I was at the SBA, and I had business owners who came to the SBA telling me, and I found this hard to believe, but then I confirmed that it was indeed the case, that if you wanted to get a loan, say a $100,000 loan, the bank was asking you for over $100,000 in cash collateral in the form of a CD. It's like, I have $100,000 in a CD, why do I need you? Right? Right? Unfortunately, that did happen. So in that context, it is important to understand who is going to give you the money. And this is, everything I'm telling you regarding the money also has a very clear correlation to crowdfunding and crowdsourcing, as we will see in a moment. So the third element that you need to be successful in business, of course, is to know how to run, to have the skill set to run your business. Have the experience or the skills that are required. So, what skills do you need? Make a very honest assessment of what skills do you have, but also what skills you do not have, and you need to bring from outside, right? That doesn't necessarily mean you need to get employees or hire more people, but it does mean that you need to find where you have a hole in your skill set. You need to find a way to fill that hole, and that's part of what crowdsourcing is all about. So, what skills do you have, and what skills do you need? And as the analogy continues, of course, you need money, people, and time to run any business, to nurture any business. Today, we're going to discuss primarily the money, the people, and to an extent, the time. But money and people, I think, are the most critical elements that you need to run a business and to launch a business that is successful. And by the way, some of you are familiar with the statistic that about 55%, 60% of businesses do not last beyond 6 years. Okay? So the odds really are against the entrepreneur, against the small business owner who's getting started. The biggest chunk, of course, happens in the first year. The first year, 25% of all new businesses fail within 12 months. And then there is a curve that starts to balance. It's not such steep over time, but about 40% or so of businesses last beyond 6 years. And once you last beyond 6 years, your chances increase dramatically. Because you have gained experience, you have gained a reputation, you have a client base. There are many elements that make it easier for you to survive for a long time. But that requires money, that requires people, and that requires time, particularly your time in terms of developing the idea and having the passion to work. Because if you think that working only for yourself, being an entrepreneur, a solopreneur, is going to be easier than a 9-to-5 job, I'm sorry, but it's not the case. That's not the reason why you go into business. It's not to work 9 to 5, right? There are many reasons, but that's not one of them. It could be that if you're successful and you develop this business over time, over many years, yeah, eventually you'll make a good living working less hours. But in the first few years, it's just the contrary. And in that sense, now we're going into the money part. And this is where I like to dedicate a little bit more time to discuss the 3 different types of ways in which you can obtain funding from the crowd. And there are actually 3 main groups of crowdfunding platforms. Again, what makes this unique in our time is the fact that now we have the internet. And now we can connect with people in India, in Argentina, in Russia, in Holyoke. And some people might be interested in funding your idea or your product. Why? Because they feel a pain, and you're offering an aspirin that they have not seen before. And sometimes they give you money just because they want to make that happen. They want to see that product being developed. Sometimes they give you money because they think they're investing in a company that will, in turn, give them substantial benefit back. And sometimes they just do it because they're generous. There is donation crowdfunding, there is reward crowdfunding, and then there is something called equity crowdfunding. The third that I have here is crowd lending. Similar to crowdfunding, except that here you have members of the crowd who are willing to lend you money in small fractions. Okay? So these 2 entities, these 2 platforms really bypass the bank. Okay? They connect you as the crowd with me, the potential borrower. And each of you gives me $25 towards my project, whatever my project is. But multiply this audience by the thousands, and now you start to see how the internet and the possibilities, the tools available online allow you to expand your lending capability beyond just a bank or a set of a few banks in your community. So let's take again each of them in turn. Reward, equity, and crowd lending. And by the way, you can interrupt me at any point if you have any doubts regarding what I'm presenting. Any questions so far? No? So reward crowdfunding. In this case, 2 of the main companies or platforms that exist that allow you to do this are Kickstarter and Indiegogo. Anyone heard of Kickstarter before? Most of you, right? Indiegogo? Of those who have heard of it, can you explain to the rest of the group how it works or how you think it works? Yes?
It's a 30-day system. I have a grandson who wanted to, he had a small music group, wanted to make a CD of it, and went online to Kickstarter. Goal was $3,000. In 6 days they had it.
Wow. To
Yeah.
produce a music?
Yes.
Excellent. To produce a CD. And that's a very typical example of when you can do with crowdfunding. As a matter of fact, there's some differences between these 2. Some of them are more focused on artists, on creative process. Some of them are more focused on helping businesses. Some of them, for example, Kickstarter is much more based on delivering a specific project or item or thing. Okay? So in your case, a CD, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Another relative just had an idea for real fruit popsicles and needed a separate kitchen in order to produce it. They went online with Kickstarter, 30-day goal of $50,000. Up until the last minute, they weren't going to make it, but they made it in the last minute.
The 60,000
Yeah,
for fruit popsicles.
yes, for a kitchen to produce these.
Commercial kitchen.
Okay.
Yeah.
let's go back for a moment to banks, okay? And again, I don't want to offend any bankers in the audience or any lenders, but how many of you think that a banker would think twice about giving $60,000 to someone with no or little experience or little credit who wants to manufacture fruit popsicles?
No way.
No way, right? You would? No. Right? And that's what opportunities like crowdfunding, reward crowdfunding in particular allow. Now,
There's no expectation of return from
there
this.
is no expectation of return except maybe a return of an item.
Yes.
Maybe the
You
person
get a
who
CD,
gave,
yeah.
maybe the person who gave your son $10 will get the first copy of the CD, or $20, whatever the perk. They call them either rewards or perks. Okay? So if the perk is, of course, of a higher value, you get more benefit. It could be that the perk that you get is just a thank you note, because you just gave $5. Because you like the cause, you like the project, you're willing to help, but you don't want to spend much, right? So for $5, you probably don't get the CD, but you get a thank you note, or you might get a mention. I have seen projects in which authors are writing a novel, and they're willing to put the name of the protagonist of the novel using the name of that one who contributes the most, right? The highest amount. Interesting, right? Yeah. Others, if they're creating a film, they might give credits in the production team to those who give a higher amount. Okay? But does it really cost you much? Not really. I mean, you're going to need a name for your protagonist, right? Why not use the name of the person who gave you $1,000 to do the copywriting of your book, right? And that's the way Kickstarter and Indiegogo work. They do not presume that you will get a monetary return on your contribution. You might get an item, you might get a preview, you might get access. Oh, for the biggest contributor, you'll have access to the behind-the-scenes filming of the movie. Hey, you might even have a cameo in the movie, right? But that is very different from the second type of crowdfunding, which is equity crowdfunding or equity-based, yes.
I've seen some situations where you don't get, like in his example, up to the last minute, they weren't going to get anything until they hit the goal.
Yes.
Whereas in others, you'll get whatever you can collect. Is that a difference between those two?
It is indeed. Great question. I failed to mention that. Kickstarter is an all or nothing mechanism.
Not anymore. It used to be they now have flexible campaigns.
The Indiegogo has flexible campaigns.
Kickstarter as well, they ran a prototype. I'm not sure if it's with the general public.
It might be a beta. To my knowledge, they only do all or nothing at this point. Indiegogo definitely allows you to keep a portion, and it's a smaller portion, but it does allow you to keep a portion. So for example, Kickstarter, let's imagine the case of the $60,000. If the popsicles had not reached the $60,000, they get nothing. Even if they're at $59,000, they get nothing. Okay? But if they get over 60, they get it all, minus the fee collected by Kickstarter, right? Which I think is 4%, 4 or 5%, depending on how you're structured. Now, Indiegogo does give you the opportunity to keep a portion of what you raise. So in that example of the $59,000 that they might have raised on Indiegogo, since they didn't achieve the goal, they're going to have to pay 9% to Indiegogo. If they surpass the 60, now their fee it goes down to something similar to Kickstarter, 4 or 5%. And that's the difference.
So what's the advantage of whether it's one or the other, or whether Kickstarter does it flexible? What would be the advantage or disadvantage of choosing one?
Well, traffic, exposure. Kickstarter has dramatically more traffic and exposure and brand recognition than Indiegogo. So if you truly, there are many ways to skin that cat. And there's no right answer which is better, Kickstarter or Indiegogo. Some people think Kickstarter is better because of the traffic and the exposure you get. Some people think Indiegogo is better because you get at least a portion of what you raise, right? I would say probably depends on how big is your idea, how good is your idea, and how much effort you are willing to put behind your crowdfunding campaign. Because if you truly believe that you have an idea that is revolutionary, that's going to be a hit, you probably want to go with Kickstarter because you're going to get a lot more traction faster than Indiegogo. And you might not be as concerned with not reaching your goal, particularly if you set a goal that is realistic. Don't of course, don't put a goal that is so high that you will never achieve it, right? Of course, you can always collect beyond your goal, and many companies and many products actually do, right? But I would say that's one of the main differences. You had a comment?
Kickstarter is one of the ways to test your idea.
It's a way to test your idea, and it's also a way to market your idea. Okay? There is a product that was launched on Kickstarter. I think they finished the campaign in October or November last year, and it was a cooler. Yeah, it's a cooler that has, I think it has a solar cell, so you can actually keep your beer cold at the beach, and you can also connect your iPhone and recharge your iPhone. It's interesting, it's unusual, but they raised millions of dollars for a cooler, right? Right now, many of you probably have heard that Apple is launching an iWatch, right? So you'll be able to surf the net on your watch, etc. Well, there's a new product launched on Indiegogo that I saw this morning that is a stand for your iWatch and your iPhone recharge. You saw that, right? They already are, this morning I think they were at 450% of their goal, right? Because they worked based on, the timing was excellent for them, right? It's really nice looking, beautiful design, and they set a fairly low threshold in terms of their goal for crowdfunding, and they surpassed it within days. And they're at 450, 460% of their goal, right? I'm not saying, let me be honest too, I'm not saying this is easy. This is not easy. There's a lot of people who come up with great ideas and are competing. So to your point, Marcos, yeah, Kickstarter gives you a lot more traffic, but because there's a lot more traffic, there's also a lot more competition, right? So for every cooler with a solar panel, you have 1,000 products that do not reach their goal. But it is really an interesting way to also get your product known, to create brand awareness. Because if you make it big, I'm pretty sure those folks who developed the cooler are thinking about the next item they'll produce. And with the funding that they generated, and by the way, they don't have to repay a penny. They don't have a loan. They don't have an interest cost. They did not share any percentage of their business. So they are the sole owners of their company. They're not sharing the pie with anyone, right?
And then there was a second try, the first time they didn't make it.
Yeah, that's right.
They redesigned it.
That's right. And that's why I say it takes a lot of work. A lot of work, and their books, and their blogs, and their podcasts, and their consultants who specialize in how to improve your chances of making it in crowdfunding. Okay? Some are extremely thorough and legitimate. Some of them might not. So be careful if you're choosing a consultant for crowdfunding to support your crowdfunding campaign. Do your research. But there's some who are extraordinary and will definitely help you. Now, the second type of crowdfunding is called equity crowdfunding. And as you can imagine, in this case, the difference is that there is an expectation that whoever puts money is putting money in exchange for a percentage of the company. Okay, so you're buying equity. You're not giving money in the hope that you will get a CD or a copy of the book back. You're giving money because you're going to be a partial owner of that business. Shutting out. Let's just reconnect. Okay. And these are just two examples of what is becoming a more and more popular platform to raise money for businesses. AngelList is a very, very, it's a fascinating platform where you can see companies of all types, where you as a potential investor will see very detailed analysis of the business idea, of the financial fundamentals, of business projections, But in order for you to be an investor here, you need to be accredited. Okay? Not everyone is allowed to invest in AngelList or Circle Up or the other equity crowdfunding platforms. Why do you think is that? What do you think they control? Who can invest?
Potential liability, legal license for checking balance and stuff, both the legal license Circle Up, plus the control to invest capital.
Right. Well, they do it primarily because they want to control the excess and the fraud use of the platform, right? It's actually governed by law and regulation. If you're not someone who has enough money, enough net worth, they will not allow you to invest in either one of these two. So you cannot become part of the crowd who will fund in equity crowdfunding if you don't have the means to risk that money. Okay? And the government does it for a simple reason. If I have modest means and someone who has dubious intentions comes and says, invest $10,000 in my company, this is the next Facebook, this is the next Google, you'll become a zillionaire, and that person gives a significant percentage of his or her savings to a fraudulent offer, or not necessarily fraudulent. Startup investing is very risky, very, very risky, for the reason I stated earlier. Most companies, most startups fail within the first few years of their existence. So it's a very risky proposition. Now, on the side of the company, of the startup, let's imagine that, no, you're not an investor, you're not interested in investing, you're interested in the money, right? You can go to any of those platforms, or there are dozens more, and present your case. Just think about it as almost like a virtual sales pitch of your business to a significant audience, to a significant crowd. So instead of me selling you or pitching you my business idea to the 30 or 40 of you, I'm pitching my idea to 30 or 40,000 investors who, by the way, have money because they have been approved as accredited investors. Okay? So this is an extraordinarily powerful mechanism to raise money. Yes?
How do they deal with intellectual property on those sites?
Well, some of the information that is shared is proprietary. A lot of it is not shared, of course, because you don't want to risk the possibility of sharing trade secrets that someone would copy. I would go back to my original point, though, that I think it's preferable to err on the side of testing your idea and really getting traction. These are very sophisticated investors. If you share your idea with as much level of detail as you feel comfortable sharing, and with that level of detail, there's no traction, there's no interest, there's something probably going on there. They're probably telling you something. Maybe you need to refine the idea or fine-tune it or tweak it, right? But again, they are very sophisticated, they know their industry very well, and it is like an excellent way to test your business proposition. For example, Circle Up, I think they have expanded beyond food packaged goods products, but they started doing mostly packaged goods. Okay? And the people who created Circle Up are experts in the consumer packaged goods industry. So they know things like allocation in supermarkets and how to capture a fair share of the shelf and all of those consumer products techniques. And they can tell, based on decades of experience, when you're presenting an idea that has potential and when it doesn't. And even for them, again, as a very significant number of those companies fail, even with all those caveats. Yes?
Do you issue a stock to the investor, or is it an agreement, or how is that?
Yeah, there's actually a placement document that you review before you invest, and it gives you a percentage ownership of the company. Okay? And everything else that has to do with investing in a company, a private equity investment in this case, applies to AngelList and applies to Circle Up. So for example, they have to disclose what dilution there will be, meaning how many shares are there offering in the market, and therefore how much they will dilute the value of those shares. Yes.
Where's the SEC standing on this?
Okay, excellent question, which is going to be my following point of discussion. In a couple of years ago, President Obama signed into law the Jobs Act. The Jobs Act is a law that rethinks the concept of an accredited investor. Right now, you cannot be an accredited investor unless you have a net worth of $1 million or more, and that excludes your home equity. So you cannot count the value of your primary residence in that net worth calculation. So $1 million or more of net worth, or a individual income of at least $200,000 per year, or $300,000 if you're a married couple. Okay? For the last 2 years, and with a fairly good expectation of making the same amount of money in subsequent years. So that is the definition, current definition of accredited investor. So of course that excludes a lot of people. And what the Jobs Act does is it opens the door, the possibility for expanding that umbrella, so that a lot more people who might not qualify based on income could qualify, and therefore have access to Circle Up and Angel List. Because let's face it, I don't think, at least most of us, would probably never qualify to invest at the early stage in Facebook or Google. This is a very selective club. You have to be a member of one of the venture capital firms that gets on at the very early stage of Facebook and Google. And that's where you make the real money, right? When you invest at the early stage. But for us mere mortals, that's not a realistic possibility, right?
Is there a time limit on the expectation for distribution of profit?
Every company will have its different
On
criteria.
the part of investors?
Yeah, typically an investor wants to return, get a return between 5 and 10 years, more likely 10-year times, okay? They do realize that at the beginning of any startup, they're basically losses, not profits. So they do not divest until year 10, typically, but it might